We're making an easy baked chocolate cheesecake with rich chocolate flavor that's higher in protein with cottage cheese and protein powder. The gluten-free chocolate cookie crust is made with oat and almond flour. Hello, my name is Nicole Bonilla. If you like healthier recipes to our favorite foods, then you are in the right place. Now, to make this recipe, you could jot down these ingredients as we go along, or you can click on the link that's in the video description below. And that will take you to the full recipe with all the details, including nutrition facts, ingredients and substitutions, and frequently asked questions. Now, to make this cheesecake, we're going to start by making our crust, and I find it works easiest to use a food processor, but you can also use just a bowl or a hand mixer or a spatula to mix it all together. So we're going to start with 1.5 cups of oat flour. Now, you can either use store-bought or you can very easily grind your own by just taking some old-fashioned or quick oats, mixing them in your blender for about 20 seconds. Next, we'll add 1 cup of almond flour, which gives it delicious flavor, and of course, this all keeps it gluten-free. Now, if you click on the recipe link, I also included some additional flour options that you can use. Now, when it comes to the cocoa powder, you have 2 options. Regular cocoa powder will give it more of just a medium brown color, which will make the crust the same color as the cheesecake filling. But if you would like the crust to have a contrast to the filling, then you can use black cocoa powder. And I included a link in the video description below to this one right here. But you can absolutely use regular cocoa powder if that's all you have. So we'll add 1/4 cup of black cocoa powder. And as our natural sweetener, we're going to add 1/2 cup of maple syrup and 3 tablespoons of coconut oil. You can also use melted butter. Then we'll add 1/4 teaspoon of salt. Now we'll just put on our lid and blend it till it's all well combined. And then as soon as it forms this large ball, we know we have the perfect consistency. And if it's still too crumbly and hasn't quite come together as a ball, then you can add just a little bit more maple syrup or the coconut oil. Now, this recipe works great in an 8 or 9-inch springform pan, and I'm just going to spray mine with some coconut oil first. Then we'll just drop in our dough. Then using my spatula, I'll just start pressing it up on the sides. And now that I have it up about 1.5 inches on the sides, we'll go ahead and spread out the bottom. And then a tip for getting a nice corner down inside your cheesecake is to use a measuring cup that has a right angle on it. And I'll just press it into the corner, going around the whole crust. And then I'll just go around with my fingers and create a nice even ridge across the top. Now that we've pressed our crust out nice and even, we have one more step before we can bake it, and that's to take a fork and just poke a few holes in the bottom. And this makes sure that you don't get any air pockets under the crust. And now this is ready to go into a 350-degree oven for 12 minutes. Now, while that's baking, we want to wash out our food processor, and then we can make the filling. Now, to make the cheesecake filling, we're going to start with our cottage cheese, and you could use any variety that you like. I like using the full-fat version for the most creaminess. So we're going to add 2 cups of cottage cheese. And as our sweetener, we're going to add 1/3 cup of maple syrup. Now, you could use the same amount of granulated sugar or powdered sugar if you prefer. And then we'll add 2 teaspoons of vanilla extract. Now, since I want the cheesecake filling to be a medium brown color, I'm going to use just some regular cocoa powder instead of the black cocoa powder that we used in the crust. So we're adding 2 tablespoons of cocoa powder. And then to increase the protein, we're going to use some chocolate flavored protein powder. Now, if you prefer not to use the protein powder, you can replace it with 2 more tablespoons of cocoa powder and another 2 tablespoons of cottage cheese. And I love using this protein powder because it's organic, naturally sweetened, and we really like the flavor. So I'm going to add 1/3 cup or 2 scoops of protein powder. And then to add that cheesecake tang, we're going to add 2 teaspoons of lemon juice and 1/4 teaspoon of salt. And then we'll blend this on high until we no longer see the curdled cottage cheese texture. Now, as a natural stabilizer for this cheesecake, we're going to use some chocolate chips, which will also enhance the chocolate flavor. So I've just taken 1/2 cup of chocolate chips and put them into a microwave-safe bowl. And then we're going to microwave this in 30-second intervals until it is smooth and creamy. So after the first round of 30 seconds, we're going to give it a quick stir, and you can see that it's just starting to melt. And then put it back in for another 30 seconds. So it's looking better after our second round, but it's not quite there yet, so we'll put it in for one more round of 30 seconds. So after 3 rounds of 30 seconds, this is nice and melted, and I'll give it a good stir. And then we're going to pour this into our food processor, and then add 2 eggs plus 2 egg whites, and then blend it on high until smooth. And that looks perfect. Well, here's our crust after 12 minutes in the oven, and I'm just going to set it into a cookie sheet. And then we'll be pouring some water in this cookie sheet before we put it back in the oven. Now I'll just pour the filling right into the warm crust. Now, if you could use more healthy inspiration on a regular basis, I invite you to join my email list. All you have to do is click on the link in the video description below, and that is the best way for us to stay connected. And as soon as we pour in the filling, go ahead and just spread it around with our spatula. Now, the filling is going to rise just a hair, but will end up at the same height that it is right now. And then we'll give our pan a few taps, get rid of any air bubbles. and then we can smooth out any air bubbles that popped up. Now this is ready to go into a 325-degree oven for anywhere between about 60 and 70 minutes. I'm going to pour some water into the pan about halfway up the side of the pan, and that water bath is going to create some steam which will keep the cheesecake moist as it bakes, which helps to minimize any cracks across the top. So into the oven this goes. Now I already know that my springform pans are waterproof on the bottom once I snap in the rim, but in case you're concerned about yours, go ahead and take some aluminum foil and wrap it up around the bottom of the pan to keep it airtight. Now once the cheesecake comes out of the oven, you'll want to let it cool on your counter until it's cool enough to go into your fridge, and then you can leave it there for several hours or even overnight to let it cool completely. And I have one here that I made yesterday that's ready to cut. So first I'm going to take a very slim knife and just kind of run it around the edge just to make sure it separates before I take off the rim. And I'm not meeting much resistance, so I think it already did. I'll go ahead and unsnap our rim, and now we have this gorgeous chocolate cheesecake. And I love using the black cocoa powder because it gives us a beautiful contrast to the brown filling. Oh, that's just nice and soft filling, and then a nice firm crust. Pull that out. Oh, that looks gorgeous. Now you can enjoy this as is or add a few very delicious embellishments, and one of them is to make a really simple chocolate ganache. So all you do is take about half a cup of chocolate chips, melt them down in the microwave like we did in 30-second intervals, and once it's melted, just pour in 2 tablespoons of milk and stir it until it's well incorporated, and it will be very pourable as it's warm, and then it will slightly harden once it cools. So I'm going to take a little spoonful of this chocolate ganache sauce and just kind of drip it over the top, and a little plop of some whipped cream, and a raspberry, because it's just super beautiful and tasty. All right, now it's ready. That is delicious. As soon as you bite in, you get that smooth chocolatey texture of the filling that is so good. And I love the little hint of lemon, which gives it that nice tang of a typical cheesecake. And the crust tastes just like the ones you would make with crushed up cookies. Now, of course, this isn't going to be exactly like a traditional cheesecake that's made with cream cheese and lots of whipping cream, but I love that it's made with clean, healthier ingredients and higher in protein. Well, thank you so much for hanging out with me today in my kitchen. I've included a link to the full recipe, and it's in the video description below. And that will take you to my website, gentletummy.com. And I also invite you to like and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. And I invite you to join me again in my kitchen.